Greetings, everyone. Denny Grimes talking about the mastery of real estate, and I have the pleasure. I don't know what happened. The stars aligned. I've got some of my star team members on here that will probably show off their stuff because they've been working on this mastery level stuff for a year. And I told my bold group yesterday. You guys don't know this, that I'd put my agents up against anybody as far as role play experts. You guys have come a long way. So I appreciate you being on. A couple of things I want to talk about. I learn from my team all the time. So I always have, just for those people that are on or watching by YouTube, Facebook Live. If you haven't already, I'm looking for my 300th subscriber to my YouTube channel. If you're 300, if you're number 300, I've got a set of rusty Ginsu steak knives that I'd be glad to give them to you. And actually get one of them in case I get more than one winner. And I'll enter you into the drawing for the two tickets to Greece. So just go to Denny Grimes Mastery of Real Estate. It looks like that. And when a 300 bell goes off, you are going to be the lucky winner of a dull knife. Number two, make sure you time block and put in your calendar the mastery level role play. It's every Tuesday, 1 to 2 Eastern time. And so make it part of your regular real estate diet. Really appreciate that. If you need me for anything, send me an email at DennyDeliversTraining@gmail.com. Happy to help you out if you have any specific questions. So I've got some, Rick's on, great. So I want to start today with, before we get into some scripting or whatever, I have a couple of thoughts. I always start with some factoids or thoughts for the day. So here's what I jotted down today to talk about. And I had a conversation with Sonny, and Sonny, we may even want to role play that, what you had, because I think it's a worthy thing to role play, Sonny. And sometimes I say things that I don't really know what I say. And I thought, oh, that sounded pretty good. So I thought I'd share it with you. So if you're going to read the slide behind me, it says, it's not our job to deliver the impossible. It's not our job to deliver the impossible. So where my thinking was on that was a conversation I actually had with Sunny, and she has an unrealistic seller. And even in this market, that seller may be a little bit unrealistic, maybe on a different planet. And she made a comment, and this is how I took it. Well, if a seller asks a certain number and we accept that responsibility, even if we leave our fingerprints off it. And I think, Sunday, you asked me, so what if we can't do it? And I thought, that's a nugget right there, because I want you to get out of the mental framework. We don't have to do anything. It's never up to us. In fact, if you want to have an unrealistic seller and take that unrealistic price and multiply it by its zip code, and if it sells there, are we not in favor of that? Yes, because our fee is based on the sales price, right? So we're always on board with the sellers and what they want for their properties. However, if you move away all the debris and the dust in that statement was, and because I remember used to having to feel the responsibility of having that seller be successful. And I just happened to say to Sonny, it's not our job to deliver impossible. You've been on this call. If you've been on this call before, my team certainly knows when you list a home, there's only 3 outcomes. They already know that the market's efficient. I've used the analogy over and over again about putting water in the freezer. And if it freezes, the freezer didn't do it. So if we take a listing and it doesn't sell, it's just because the listing's not in the right environment. It has nothing to do with our intentions, because we're rooting for sellers. We really are. So I think that's a great little line to have in your memory banks, your programming, that, you know what? Buyers and sellers want to sell or buy. They have to want to sell or buy more than we want them to. All right. Any thoughts on that? Was that worth the 3 minutes or 5 minutes I took on it? Or is it too commonsensical? Got some regulars on there. Anybody like think that's a nice little aha? Maybe I just impressed myself.
No, it's a great aha, because I think, we have a tendency to overpromise and underdeliver at times. And so by I think it takes the pressure off us and also our sellers. One of the things I had opportunity to use right now is this past weekend and got a listing is the 3 outcomes. I was not going to put my DNA on the selling price, on the list price. And so the 3 outcomes, that just made my job so much easier. Because yeah.
Rick, let me drill down a little bit on that, because you bring up a good point. And I've got young budding real estate agents here, and them hearing from somebody else is always a good thing. And I'm proud of you guys. Literally, I'm proud of you guys on the team. I brag about you all the time when I'm teaching classes that, you guys are really getting it. Even though it may not sound like that when I'm on role play with you, I'm impressed. Okay. So Rick, when you say over promise and under deliver, let's just talk about that a minute. What can we promise and not deliver on? There are some things, and you guys should take some notes on this, because there are a couple of things that we can under deliver on. But I want to know what Rick has to say on this.
What are the things that we can over promise on?
Yes, and under deliver on.
I think for me, what comes to mind, we over promise that everything's gonna be smooth. We're not gonna have any bumps in the road, and so the expectation is to let them know that, hey, if we're gonna encounter something somewhere down the road, and that's what I'm here for, to help you get over those bumps. But I think the tendency is, oh, everything's gonna be fine. I've got it. I'm good. I'm gonna take care of you, and kind of the used car salesman, plaid coat guy.
Herb, WKRP in Cincinnati. Who remembers that?
Yes.
Nobody?
Yeah,
Nobody
I do.
remembers that. Not on my team, they don't remember it. So, all right, let's talk about that just for a moment. Then in a listing presentation, I know we talk about setting expectations. Who has a great dialogue with what Rick's talking about right here, as far as making sure you're not over-promising there won't be some bumps along the way? What script do you use? What analogy do you use? And if you don't use one, I'll come up with 5 or 6 for you. So Rick, what do you use? Do you actually tell them up front that, hey, look, there could be issues?
I do.
And have a conversation with me. Okay, so I'm the seller, so go.
All right, Denny. I just want to, thank you so much for helping me out here. But I just do want to set, when we're working through this transaction, there's a lot of things that neither one of us have control over, and I don't have control over. But when those things come up, Denny, just know that I am there. I'm not going to be the hidden agent. I'm going to be right there working those things out with you and negotiating on your behalf to smooth those out as much as possible.
Okay, then, and they could say, okay, I'm sure a lot of them do. And some people that might get, some people might think, well, why would you want to say that? You might raise some issues. So and the seller might say, well, what kind of issues, Rick?
Well, for instance, home inspections. That's generally an issue that all home sellers encounter an issue with. Something comes back and the buyer makes a request, or something comes up in the home inspection that's a surprise. And so negotiating through that with the buyer and their buyer's agent, with the buyer's agent, that requires a certain amount of finesse to be able to keep the deal moving forward, because the goal is to cross the finish line. And so home inspections is one of the things where sometimes the wheels could fall off.
All right. Well, all right. So great. We could overpromise there couldn't be any bumps along the way. I like the analogy. Say, listen, when you hop in an airplane, you fly from, Fort Myers to Boston. Have you ever heard the captain say there, they might experience some bumps along the way? I mean, so the bottom line is our level of experience is we're going to get you off the ground. We're going to get you landed safely. And you know what? There might be some bumps. And when things come up like that, we'll let you know, and we'll be right there. Kind of the same thing Rick's saying. Awesome. What else can we over, this is the critical one. This is probably the biggest one. This is the biggest mistake agents make, particularly younger agents. They overpromise something and underdeliver. What is it? Anyone?
What the home will sell for?
Well, that's another subject. No, because we don't have any control over that, really. This is something we do have control over. It starts with C and it has an Asian communication.
Communication. I was going to say follow up with the client.
That is the biggest. Listen, in the listing process, the market dictates whether or not it's going to say yes or no, correct? So we have no control over the market. And as you learn through Bold, and you guys will have Bold on Thursday, and you don't know have taken Bold, you'll know this. There's only two things we have control over anyway. It's how we think and what we do. So if Rick's talking about overpromising and under-delivering, the kiss of death is, number one, overpromising on what the seller can get or the market would give the seller for the home. And in this market, maybe under-promising. That's why we set expectations, not prices. Here's the other one. It's your level of communication. The only thing that you can control in a listing environment, and if you find a way to communicate this to the seller, is the market will say if we're positioned properly. The only thing we have control over, that I have control over, is how I interpret the market and how I communicate with you. Does that make sense? Short of that, I mean, if you're promising an ad and all this other stuff, yeah, you can do all that if you want to. We do have control over, making sure the information in the MLS is right, good photography, all that. However, communication is the big one. I just want you to go back and understand it. Do not assume the responsibility of selling a house. You realize selling a house is not in our control. The seller controls price, access, and condition. And they can block us on all three of those. So it's not our job to deliver the impossible. All right, this came up too. Actually, my daughter brought it up to me, I think maybe privately, and I think I mentioned it this morning. I'm not really sure. I think it may not be a bad point of conversation. Is it time to drop white hot market when you're dealing with sellers? Now, I'll give you some background, and based on where you guys are located, give me your thoughts on this. I'm not suggesting, and Morgan wasn't suggesting, you drop it with buyers. However, I just did. If you go to my team Facebook page, and I think I posted on the YouTube channel on Friday, I did a news spot, 3 minutes on, people are talking about, when's the market going to change? So I did a 3-minute spot on what changes should we be looking for before the change. And I talk about the buyer's mood. Which is just the feeling. Step 2 is it's going to be, the buyers are going to be a little bit more finicky. They're not going to be as rabid to do everything the seller wants to do. They'll be a little bit cooled off a little bit. So those are the first 2 signs. And the only people that will see those signs are active agents that are doing enough transactions that they can feel the micro vibrations in the market. The third sign is you're going to see fewer showings, fewer offers, maybe not as many, $100,000 over asking price. You'll see maybe inventory grow, and eventually you might see some softening of the price. So I'll speak from this market here, and you guys on my team, I've got a handful here. You all can pipe in here because you guys are out there, with your feelers, so to speak, picking up vibrations. I sense a cooling of the market. And the newscaster asked me what phase that I thought we were in. And I said, well, I think we're between phase 1 and phase 2. I think buyers are a little bit tired of running after sellers and at the same velocity. I'm not saying buyers aren't interested. I'm just saying if the interest was 20 last month and the month before that, it may be 18 now. So team, you guys are working with buyers all the time. And then I'll spread it out. So what are you guys seeing or feeling? It's not really seeing, it's a feeling. What are you guys feeling? Jeffrey, my co-host is here. Have you been
Hello.
hiding? Have you been hiding, Jeffrey?
Oh, what? Yeah, I got a little late back from my lunchtime workout. Sorry about that.
You need a haircut.
It's growing, man. It's growing.
So anybody, you guys, come on, don't be shy. I mean, Sonny, Brendan, Jeffrey.
Yeah, up here in DC market, I mean, I think buyers are getting frustrated, and I'm having more conversations with people like, I'm just going to wait a while. I'm not interested in like paying the kind of price point that's happening. I think there's some frustration, and we've seen very, very small, like subtle kind of like, weekends where people are trying to come in a little high on the price, they're not getting the activity. So it's slowed down just enough that it's like you have to be a little more realistic on your pricing if you want to get your house sold quickly. So I was just watching, I've got a listing coming up, and I was watching the one in the neighborhood that just went on, and we're listed 10 grand under where they're going to be. We're going to be listed 10 grand under that one. And I felt like that one was priced a little high. It's vacant, not really updated. And it was 10 grand higher than where we're coming in at. So I thought that would help us. But then 5 days later, with no activity, they dropped the price 30 grand. So I just saw today, it's only been listed since last week, and they dropped it from 600K to 570 after 1 week.
So if you think the market was at this level, right here, it's taken a decibel or so down. Would you not agree with that, Jeffrey?
Yes, I would agree.
Fort Myers agents, what do you think? T, Brendan, Marky, I mean, what do you, I'm not predicting a crash here. I'm just, you guys, you've got to trust your feelings, because let me just tell you, I remember, because I found the email, the last market correction happened in right at the turn of the year from December 2005 to 2006, January 2006. In October, 3 months before that, I wrote an email to the real estate writer for the Fort Myers News Press. And I said, I can't really put my finger on it. There's something weird going on. There's this feeling I'm picking up. Listen, you guys, you got to trust that. Now, that was basically, I was picking up the vibrations. Now, the market didn't demonstrate it for 3 months. That's when the bubble burst. Again, I'm not talking about a bubble bursting here. I'm talking about a micro change in the velocity of the market, which is why I'm having the conversation. If we're not careful, this was a point of keep telling the sellers white hot, white hot, white hot. They may be thinking the market's still at the same decibel level. And like Jeff's saying, if the buyers have slipped down a little bit, maybe we should not use that word on sellers. So you guys, Rick, other guys around the country, Tampa, what are you seeing? I'm not saying that. Not what are you seeing? What are you feeling based on what you, the business you're doing? Anybody else want to comment on it?
Well, the market has shifted a little bit since May 27. And the only reason that I say May 27, I've been in another rooms with another top agents. And that's what they've been seeing since then. The market is being less and less, and the property are in the market for the longest time. They don't sell in the first couple of days. Now it's taking more time, a little longer.
Okay, that's the micro change. So it might be, Al, I'm going out west. Maybe we can hear from Kevin. Maybe things are always hot in California. Don't really know. What's going on in Phoenix, Al?
Yeah, no, the market's slowed down. I'm not saying it's sold a lot, but we do have more inventory right now than what we've had. I'm not seeing the escalation like we were. We were seeing 2 to 3% per month, some cases higher, and now it may be 1.5 to 2. It's so like I say, it's also we're in our summer period, which notoriously outside of last year, it normally drops a little bit because we don't have as big an audience here. So it'll be interesting to see what happens throughout the summer. But some anticipate it'll probably just level off. It's not going to increase a lot. It's not going to decrease a lot. But time will tell.
So let's, because we're having a mastery level role play class here, this kind of knowledge, you guys, is powerful. Now, again, let's just have a conversation of who would like to be a potential seller. And I'll just talk to you in terms of this information and demonstrate one of the ways you can use this information on a listing presentation. Okay, so who wants to be the seller?
Can I be
I
your seller,
nominate
Denny?
Myra. Oh, wait,
Myra.
no, who's speaking? Who's that?
T.
Oh, you're it, T. I was going to nominate Myra, but you're
Not
up.
T, not T. This is not fair. She is she's hard. All right, so so T. So are you ready to? So as we're talking about, let me ask you a question, T. No the wrong answer. How do you think the market's working? As a seller, is it working in your favor or working against you?
I don't know, Denny. I mean, I really
See
don't
what I
think-
mean? You can't get an answer from her. Okay, now pick somebody else, Jeff. Come on.
Denny, you're supposed to be telling me how to sell my house. That's why you're here.
Well, okay, we can have that conversation, but do you feel it's working in your favor or working against you?
I feel like it's in my favor. That
Okay.
It's a good time to sell.
And it is. It is. I mean, it's been working in your favor for probably about 10 or 12 years. And so based on the past sales here, we see it with 400, 425, and 430. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It was the same role play you did today. What would you like to get out of your home?
I mean, my house is nicer than those that you brought, that you're showing me. So I don't know. What do you think? Like 600?
Well, 600 would be great. I mean, if you got 600, that'd be a win for you, right?
Yeah.
And because our fee is based on sales price, it'd be a win for me. So we're on the same team. However, how do you come up with that number?
I just feel like, the market's, everyone's saying how the market's going up, and those, like you said, are the past sales. So who knows, go now, maybe my house is worth more. I saw people are increasing their house prices.
So, all right, now what I want to demonstrate, now this is no different than the normal role play right now. What I'm wanting you to pick up on before I go forward is this. You got to be very careful how you use this information, because if you use it and basically throw water on a market they think is still white hot, it may compromise you over another agent because the other agent's more bullish in the market. Did you need something, Michael? Okay. So notice I haven't brought it up yet. Now what's interesting is T is taking a pretty aggressive road, and Sonny and I had a conversation today about an over-aggressive seller. So I've already taught, I'll just go ahead and get to the bottom of it so I can get to what I want to really talk about is, so it's $600,000. If we were to list it at 600, are you ready to go with me today?
Yeah.
So again, right now in the market, I'm still taking the listing. Now I have no DNA on the price, etc. I'll go into the conversation. So now we've agreed on 6, right?
Yeah.
So probably when I start to go over the 3 outcomes, or maybe on the first follow-up pretty early in the conversation. T, let me ask you something. When you sell, are you going to be buying?
I think so. If I can find a good deal.
Okay. One of the ways, I'm just, I'm doing this on the fly, right? One of the ways that you can be very strategic about it, talk to them as a buyer, not as a seller. Because if they're in the process of maybe buying or looking, guess what? If we're feeling the micro vibrations from buyers, do you think there might be a possibility that she's feeling the same way? Because it's kind of like the market. Somebody blows a whistle and the buyers kind of act like in unison. So I understand. So you want a good deal. I get that. Okay. So how do you feel the market's working for you as a buyer? Is it working in your favor or working against you?
I'm not really sure, but I know that homes are really expensive right now, and I'd like to pay less, but it is what it is.
Have you happened to notice a slight uptick in the number of homes for sale?
I haven't noticed,
Okay.
paying attention.
All right. So probably right now, I don't know that I'd bring it up yet. Again, I have seen little tremors in these micro movements in the market before, and they kind of work themselves out. It doesn't necessarily straight line into a market change. It bears watching. So probably right now would not be the speech. And let me tell you why I probably would not have the speech of the little things we're talking about now. I still probably wouldn't use white hot. I would just say hot. The reason I wouldn't bring it up now is if for some reason, because she's over aggressive and there's not a lot of showings, maybe outcome one, low to no showings, and you had a conversation with her about how you felt the market was going, the trend of the market, could that be interpreted as being pessimistic? Yes. It's kind of like having a doctor treat you that doesn't think you're going to get better. You don't want to hear that. However, what's interesting is over a little bit of time, particularly when you have conversations with them about wanting to be a buyer, and they'll start to see like, well, I start to see a little slight uptick in inventory. Yeah, I'm starting to see houses come on the market a little bit and last a little longer. Oh, okay. Now that would be the time I'd have that conversation. Does that make sense? I have lost listings before because they thought I was down on the market. So I've learned always be honest. However, you don't have to say everything that you know. That's probably worth writing down. I'm always honest. I just don't say everything that I know. Any thoughts, any questions on that?
Hey, Denny, I think that's interesting because as I've got, a listing coming on and the conversations I've been having with my client, it's kind of like, we probably should get it on the market now while you still have a tenant in there and it's still hot. It's kind of like the conversation has shifted from we're in this white hot, incredible market to let's do it while it's still hot. So it's a little slight different conversation, and I think that's helpful. And I love the whole thing about looking at it from the buyer perspective, because now it could benefit them if it does, does slow down a little. Every market in the country is different. Interesting. Someone was talking to me the other day and they said, we were talking about Wilmington, North Carolina, which I don't know a lot about the market, but I've been there once. And, they said, like DC market always has the government. It's always, we have a housing shortage. So we've been in a hot market for a long time. It's predicted to be hot for the next 10 years because we have a Amazon HQ2 and lots of housing shortage. However, other parts of the country, I was like, well, that's probably going to slow down a little more in those more rural areas. But, he made a good point. All the baby boomers are getting ready to retire and move, if they haven't already, moving to their retirement destinations, which could feed more business to places like Florida and North Carolina and places like that so it's kind of interesting that there's a lot more going on in the market on the big picture than necessarily what just this past year.
Well, Jeff, you just said something that gave me the idea is going on to that conversation. Watch this. Rather than talking to her as the seller, now I asked her the question, have you seen an uptick in inventory? No, not really. No, watch this. Well, keep an eye out. Start watching a little closer. We're starting to see minor upticks in the number of homes for sale. Now, I think that's kind of a very strategic way. You're talking to the same person that's your seller, yet you're talking to the side of the head that's the buyer. Watch, because we're starting to see, the velocity still hot, may not be quite as hot. Now, I think that you've planted, you know what? If you plant the seed, wouldn't it be more likely that she might start to see a few more homes because you planted the seed? Then you're going to have a conversation with her because, if there's more homes coming on the market, we're starting to see some minor shifts. And then what I loved about what you said, Jeff, is like, I think we should get on the market now. I think we should get more competitive now because we're starting to see a little bit of it slowing. And here's what I said. And the reporter asked me, the last question she asked me, said, what do you, based on your level of experience, what does this all mean? And if you want to write it down, here's what I think it means. There's downward pressure on the upward pressure. The curve is starting to flatten. It's still going up, just not as much. So I said, basically, you know, the time may be over when the seller says jump, the buyers are no longer saying how high. They're just saying why. So, and I think I ended with a comment, you can no longer price your home with the Zestimate multiplied by the zip code, and that's what you get. So let's go on into something else, because we do practice what we preach. Sunny was on a listing appointment today, had almost the same scenario. She was there with her husband. Both of them have a lot of real estate experience, and what he's about, what, 40% over, Sunny, maybe, what maybe the market should be?
Mm-hmm.
And you called me and said, well, should I take it or not? And we had the conversation. I said, well, is it available for open house? And yes, and she didn't set any expectations. She knows the one of three things. So I just want you to know, and I wrote it down here, that we do practice what we preach, although it does feel weird doing it. So point number next. I have a slide here, I think, right here. What's your story? I've been talking to my team for the last several weeks. We've used it on the role play. Sometimes basically you want to use a third-party story in your conversation. So every one of us should have a third-party story for every situation we run into. Like, for example, do you have a story? Let's say you're talking to a for sale by owner. Do you have a story, something that's happened with you, happened with someone you know, or an agent in your office, or maybe even an agent on a role play, that you can give a third-party story? Let me give you an example. You even can use our story. You should have a story for every situation. So I'm going to go to you, Miguel. Are you able to talk?
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. So let's say you're a for sale by owner and you want to sell it yourself. We're having a conversation about you wanting to save money. So, well, can I tell you what just happened the other day with an agent in our office?
Yeah, what happened?
They were talking to a seller just like you, a seller that's selling unassisted. They had no representation. And don't laugh at this, Jeff or Kevin. They wanted $225,000. You hadn't seen $225,000 since George Washington lived in D.C., right? Or Alexandria. So they were ready to ask $225,000. Well, and you know what? They would have been happy. They would have sold it at $225,000 because that's what they wanted. That's all they cared for. We looked at the market and said, you know what? I think you can list for $269,000. They gave us a listing. We sold it for full price. That's $40,000 they put into our pockets, into their pocket, because they hired us. How do you think that seller feels about being represented versus going alone?
Well, they probably feel like they did a smart thing by using an agent.
Well, let me ask you. Now, they were willing to pay a buyer's agent anyway, so they're attempting to say 3% would have been $6,000. Do you think they made a good decision by going and putting $40,000 in their pocket, and it really cost them $6,000, so they put $34,000 in their pocket?
Yeah, I think it makes $34,000 worth of sense.
Well, would you like us to tell other people about a story like that for you too? Would you like to be that seller that puts extra money in their pocket and gets representation basically for free? So you see, that's what I'm talking. So and anyway, he can go one way or the other. There's power in questions. You know that. There's not a lot of power in telling. There's also power in stories. Now, does anybody else have a story like that? And you know what? You don't have to say, all you have to say is like, I was talking to an agent friend of mine, we're all friends, and he was telling about a unassisted seller, and just go through the story. That's called a third-party testimonial. You can use it. And the reason I want you to know in advance is that when you can tell it with a clear facts, just like just like you were there, I'm not making it up. I never make up things that I say because we come from integrity. I can make up a lot of stories, but it wouldn't be true. And if it's not true, it's not going to be right to say. That is absolutely true. And you can say, hey, look, I had a friend tell me just the other day, this is exactly what happened. So do you have a story for different situations? All right, I'll ask you this question. Do you have a story for a seller that's interviewing other agents that you can use that would be like that? You just pull it out of your quiver and you've got a third-party story that you can say why they should hire you. Does anybody have that?
I have that.
Who's got it?
I had a seller that was using an agent to try and market their property. And this agent was actually trying to potentially save them money by finding a buyer on his own and potentially taking a lesser commission for representing both sides. He went around the neighborhood. He passed, I think he sent out some mailers, and he was underbidding the property by about, he was advertising the property for about $15,000 less. After I met with the seller, or it should be third party. So do I include myself? Yeah, of course.
No,
After I met with,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
After I met with the seller and gave them a presentation, they decided to start working with me. I was able to advertise the property for about $15,000 more. And by the time we had some contracts, I was able to get them a qualified buyer who at the end of the day paid $40,000 over appraisal.
Now, all right. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. However, when you have your story, it's like you're in Hollywood. Did anyone pick up a couple of words he probably needs to drop out of his story? You want it to be believable.
And I didn't ask questions.
Well, that's okay. The story, you can tell the story. Did anyone pick up a couple of words that probably you don't want to use? All right. He said, I sold it for about. When you're telling a story that it's a true story, know the numbers. Because if you don't, like you were fishing around for it, fishing's not the right word. That sounds like you're making it up. You were searching, you were trying to remember the facts because you weren't. What I want you to do is not only have the story, have it ready and be able to, boom, give it to them.
Drop it with full confidence.
With the numbers, with confidence, as short as possible. That's exactly what I would say. Basically, when I have we role played this today about someone said all the agents were the same. They were going to talk to a couple other people, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, can I tell you what happened the other day when I was meeting with a seller? They were just like you. They interviewed two agents and you know what? They were ready to go. I finally convinced them to talk to me. Both of those agents said somewhere about 240, not a penny more than 250. What? And you know what? Those agents were making a very common mistake. They were looking at the past sales. They weren't looking at the future buyers, right? I said, well, what I see happening here, there's only one house for sale in your neighborhood, and there's only one house for sale under $300,000 within a mile or so of here. So how would you like to put some more money in your pocket? And they said, sure. So we listed it at $279,000 and it sold for full price. That's almost $30,000 more. Now, do you want that type of agent working for you? You see, it doesn't matter what your story is as long as it's true and you can deliver it with the numbers. I'll use the same stories over and over again. You don't have to have new stories. All right, I got one for you. And I don't know that I have one here. This is where you help me. A lot of buyers out there now want to work with a listing agent. Now that's problematic. Now we've role played that before, but because I don't work with buyers, I don't know. So you guys that work with buyers and have had somebody that wanted to work with the listing agent only, how they went forward with that and it didn't work out good, or they decided to work with you and how they won. So help us have a story for that. So this is a buyer who wants to only work with the listing agent. Jeff, do you think there's anybody that has that going on out there?
It's definitely out there. I'm trying to think of my own. I have some buyer stories, but I don't have one specific to that scenario.
Anybody work with a buyer? We're seeing that a lot. I've talked to agents even on the role play that we're seeing that. They only want to work with a listing agent, and the reason why they do is they think they can get a better buy, or they have a better chance of winning in a multiple offer situation. Anybody have a real world story?
Liliana, do you have your hand raised?
Well, my story is I got my license a few months ago. And the reason I got my license is because I couldn't find a qualified realtor to help me with my story. So I bought myself a property that I find out that it's better to buy it with having the same party in the same, so I can get more information. And now by listening to you guys, I realized that I made a mistake, because probably the agent that we got, he wasn't the perfect one. We could got a better deal. That's my story.
Well, who sees potential in that one, you guys?
Well, as a new agent, I see a huge potential for her to share that, you know, the reason I became a real estate agent is because, you know, I went out and tried to buy a house without representation, and it cost me whatever. And then you have to, you know, maybe have an additional piece of the story to share, you know, what a struggle it was, or the challenges we ran into. And like, you know, one of the things I realized is I wanted to become a real estate agent because I know how challenging it is to buy your first house. And I wanted to make sure that I could help people through that process.
Awesome. How about this? You know what? You're talking to a buyer, maybe wants to work with a listing agent, maybe just a regular one, and they're just kind of going, they have not hooked themselves up to an agent yet. And you say, hey, listen, can I tell you a story that happened to me? I bought my first house not long ago. I thought I knew somebody. This is even before I was in real estate. I've seen it on TV. It can't be that hard, right? I got hooked up with an agent. I found an agent. I found the wrong agent. And now that I'm in real estate, I look back on those times and I didn't even know what I didn't know. Listen, why don't you let me put my experience and my knowledge to work for you, so you don't make the same mistake that I did. You see, anything like that you can use as a story, if it's first person or if it's third person, will work. The last one I have here is this. Are you getting some people that are resisting stepping into the market? What story can you use about a buyer? There's a couple different angles here. What story do you have that you can use that I'm a buyer and I'm thinking like, you know what, I want to get into this crazy market. It's bidding war, blah, blah, blah. I just don't feel comfortable. Now, again, we can question question-based listening hands. We can go through that. I want a story. Anybody have a story that happened to you? Boy, I can't wait till we all get together where we can talk. You won't be afraid of talking to the camera. Come on, you guys, speak to me.
So those stories would look like buyers that you encountered and you helped them to be successful in their realizing their dreams, right? I mean, that's exactly what we're looking for here, an example.
Well, there could be two types of stories. That could be one of them, Rick. You know what? I had a buyer that thought the same thing. I was working with them. They bought a house 6 months ago. They felt the same way.
Yeah.
And you know what? The right house came along. They're in it. They're happy. And not only are they happy, their home is worth 15% more. Wouldn't you like to be that type of buyer 3 months or 4 months from now? Yes.
Yeah.
You're using the story. So do you have one like that?
Well, I'm very similar to that they were frustrated doing their own home search, and then I worked with them, and they had some disappointments, but we were able to negotiate, and we found the house that fit them, and closed the deal.
Okay.
And so, I mean, there was not really necessarily a lot of fluff, just that, a lot of buyers start out like you, searching the internet, and then they become frustrated because every time they look at a house they're interested in, they saw that it was already pending or under contract, and they became very frustrated and disenchanted. And I had a buyer which was just like that, and I worked with them, helped them to win the bid, and they were very happy with it. We closed the deal. And when you be successful like them.
Right. The bottom line is there was a lot of work. It's like running a marathon. However, when you finally get the medal, you think, man, it was worth it. Yep. Let's take it on the other side. Somebody role play with me.
Hey, Denny, real quick, before you do that, can I share kind of a buyer story that popped in my mind while you guys were going through that scenario?
Yes.
All right. So last year I was working with a client, and it was the middle of the pandemic, a few months in, and a couple months in, and we found the perfect house. The wife loved it. Everything else we were looking at was not nearly as nice in their price point. And then he started having buyer's remorse because he felt like, I don't know why we had to compete so hard, and we didn't get them to repair anything with the void only home inspection. And, I feel like we overpaid, and through the whole process, he was disappointed. A year later, he thanked me and he said, I couldn't have done this without you. And I am so happy that, that you helped us get that house, and that you helped us put in an offer that won. We've got about $50,000 worth of equity now a year later. And he legitimately apologized to me because it was being super difficult and just felt like someone was taking advantage of him. And he let me know that it was the best decision, and his wife's happy, and now they have equity that they can use towards, their future dream home, that it's growing in equity. So real story. And he legitimately told me that, he appreciated the fact that I did what was best for them, as opposed to just, trying to make them feel good.
Perfect. Everyone should have a story. Just use one of ours, because here's what I want you to remember. Then we'll go on to something else. There's buyers out there that are feeling the same pressures that the buyer you're working with now. And your buyers did one of two things. They bought. They found the house. They listened to your advice. They went forward. Yes, they were biting their nails. Yes, it was competitive. Yes, it was stressful. However, they're glad they did. Jeff's example, these people just thanked me profusely. They were a little bit ornery because of the pressure. They have $50,000 worth of equity. They're happy now. How would you like to be in those shoes 6 months or 12 months from now? You see? Now, the other side of the coin is, how many buyers have you worked with over the last year, 2 years, 3 years that did not buy because they didn't feel like it was the right time? They thought the market was going to, go sideways because of COVID, this, that, and the other. What's the story? How could you tell the story about the buyer who didn't buy? Anybody?
Yeah, I've kind of got that one now too. I've got a friend who was looking at condos in Kingstown, and she was working with a different agent who just happens to be on your buddy's team that up here.
Right.
But she's a friend of mine. But we have mutual friends through that same group, and and she didn't buy. She was looking 2 years ago, last year, waited. Now this year, she's like, I'm ready to buy. And all of a sudden the prices are 50 grand higher. And she's like, well, I think I'm not comfortable with that payment. I think I need to save more money so I can afford more home. Well, while she's making that decision over the last 6 months, the condos have gone up another 20 grand. And I'm like, it's self-defeating because you're not going to be able to save enough to offset what the market's doing. And you can lock in a payment. So she's now officially working with me for this year, but you know, and we had the conversation about, you know, the rents are going up. There's no question. There's a shortage of rentals in the DC market. Rents are going to continue to rise as well. You could have locked in a super low rate, a fixed payment. So even though you're a little concerned about your budget over time, your payment won't go up. And so we've had that whole conversation, but she hasn't pulled the trigger yet. And now the condos are about 50 grand more than what she was, you know, originally willing to spend.
So we all have stories like that. Now, how would you use it? You're talking to a potential buyer who's like feeling a little bit icky about stepping into the market. Well, let me tell you about my buddy, Jeff. He had a lady that, you know, kind of was ready to go and then kind of balked at the market. I don't know, a year ago, I forget the date.
Yeah, let's say a year ago.
And then she decided to get back in the market. Not only were the interest rates higher, the prices have gone up $50,000. And it made her kind of gulp again. And before she decided to step foot into the market seriously, the prices were up another 25,000. Let me ask you this. Do you want that to happen to you? It's all you have to do. You know, you're just like them. The other thing, guys, is this: unless something happened, a life-changing event, as ornery as crappy as buyers felt in the last year about the buying process, what percent of the buyers do you think are glad they bought when they did versus have to buy now? 95, 98%? I mean, a super majority of them?
At least.
I don't know, you know, Mr. Buyer, I don't know of any buyers that love the environment they bought in. However, I don't know of any buyers who bought that are feel bad about it. Don't you want to step on the equity elevator and start enjoying the equity growth? So anyway, notice today we didn't do any role playing with questions. Stories are equally as important. And the thing that's interesting is there's no telling in the story. I know you're telling the stories, but you're not like selling. You're telling them a story. Stories, remember, guys, are powerful. It's all you have to do. You don't have to say, well, the market's going up, this, that. Just tell somebody who won or somebody who lost. You want to be like them or you don't want to be like them. So that's what I had here today is for my thoughts. I didn't get into a lot of role play. We have time to do one, Jeff, if somebody wants to do one. I wanted you guys to start using the story if you're not doing it already.
Well, Denny, I have a question related to what we've role played the past 6 months. So here's my own little personal dilemma. It's two different conversations, and it can be a little tricky. I'm working with buyers, and I'm like, look, prices continue to rise. At some point, interest rates could go up. Your buying power goes down. You definitely want to jump in now. And then again, it's more related to our specific market when we're talking to sellers and you're like, you need to sell now while it's hot. However, all the indicators are, as I'm telling my buyers, there's no real indication that the market's going to drop in this area. And we expect, you know, steady normal growth over the next 5 to 10 years. When you're talking to a seller, you have to flip that because it's like, you have to sell right now because this is the best opportunity in history. However, I'm telling buyers one thing, and now I don't want to tell myself that's the only little personal dilemma I'm having is, you know, telling the seller, well, if you don't sell now, you know, it could be a mistake. I mean, we don't know, we don't have the crystal ball like we say, but I'm having one conversation with buyers and I'm having one with sellers, and they're not the exact same conversation. So it's a little bit of
here's my blink on excellent question. Everyone's probably wondering that question and how I'm going to answer it. I think you should have the same conversation with both people. Because just what you said, hey, listen, right now the market's crazy for sellers, but I have no idea, I have no guarantee it's always going to go up. And then you have a conversation with the buyer, you know, prices have been going up 8 or 10 years. I don't know how, I don't have any guarantee how long they're going to go up. People have been saying to me, asking the same questions for the last 3 years. All I can say is the people that stepped into the market when they did are glad. So do you want to roll the dice that the market's going to go down and maybe have this conversation in a year where you're paying 15% more? Well, by the way, you got to go where they're living. You're renting with you're living with your mother-in-law. That's got to do or something, right? Or you're renting, whatever. So I'm glad you asked the question. Why can't it be the same? The market's good for you right now. We don't know how long it's going to be this way. That's a conversation with the seller. Now, Jeff, you're the buyer. The market right now is good because it's moving up. I don't know how long it's going to move up. It may not move up forever. Now, you're not predicting tomorrow. Now, the only thing that you in your mind is you think you're giving it two different messages because you're in your mind, you're trying to spin it like that you better sell while the selling's good. And you're telling your buyers, you better buy because it's going to keep going up. Just have the same message. The market favors you right now, seller. Jeff, you as a buyer, the market favors you right now. Why does it favor you?
Because interest rates are low, and in this current market, you immediately will gain equity.
There you go. You don't know how long it's going to, because they still want to move out from their mother-in-law. Would they rather buy when the market's falling? That will be more uncomfortable. Does that give you any clarity?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. I like the, you know, it's using the positives of both situations with the, we don't know the outcome at the end. So it's a true statement on both scenarios, 100%.
It's a better time for buyers now than when the market's falling, you guys. It's a better time for sellers now because there's equity being created. So why don't you send me some ahas, some ahas. What'd you like? What'd you learn? In fact, don't even send them. Just go ahead and tell me, because there's only a few people on here. Unmic yourself if you can. What did you learn today that was worth 55 minutes of your time?
Use your story. I'm sorry. Use the story.
The story. Okay, awesome. What else?
Yeah, Denny, your stories are great. It puts everything into perspective. You know, if someone would have bought every luxury home I showed, their profit would be over $100,000 at least in each case.
How much did the people that didn't buy make?
They didn't make anything.
There's your story. We don't have to predict the market. I just look, there's people that bought that are happy. There's people that didn't buy and aren't happy. Who do you want to be? Give me another aha, guys.
You know, don't be pessimistic on the seller's market, because that can backfire and you can lose a potential listing from competing with agents that are a little more bullish.
That's right. That knowledge can be a little bit dangerous, so use it wisely. Jeff, thanks for your co-host. And, you know, it looks like you look like the Beatles, you know, with all that hair from where you started a few weeks ago, right? I had that. I wish I had that thick head of hair. So you guys have an awesome time. Have an awesome week. If you need me, reach out to me. Go and like my YouTube. How do you do it? Subscribe to my YouTube. Number 300 special prizes. Ginsu steak knives, trips to Greece. All right, let's see you. Be careful out there.
All right,
Denny. Thanks, Denny.
Hey, Denny, Kevin Nolan said you're pure gold.